بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. One of the things that those Muslims who are say around about 40 or 30 or younger than that, have grown up in an age, in a time in which they have probably witnessed nothing of Muslim stability, nothing of Muslim social beauty, but what they have seen, either experiencing it directly in Muslim majority countries, or in our case here, in the relatively secure West, what they witness is country after country, year after year, calamities, tragedies, war, mass infliction, losses, political contrivances against Muslim communities and the Muslim population by and large. And that's the case even as we speak today. Those perhaps who are 40 plus, 50 plus, may vaguely remember a time in which majority Muslim countries, even if they had lost much of their splendor, but you could at least see in many places a type of aman, a type of stability, social peace and social security. The countries weren't always afflicted with civil war, which in our religious tradition we call fitna. They weren't afflicted with great wars. There were, but not as much as today. And nowadays, wherever we look in the Muslim world, there is some great tragedy or another. And I say great in terms of the numbers of people being killed, afflicted, displaced from their countries. In some people's hearts, in the hearts of some Muslims, there is anger and rage at why this is happening. In some people's hearts, it's a matter of great pity and sorrow. In many minds, there is this question: how did it come about? How did this state of affairs, for an ummah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes in the Quran as kuntum khayra ummatin ukhrijat lin-nas, you are the best ummah or nation ever raised for mankind. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said in the Sahih Hadith in the Sunan of Tirmidhi that the people of paradise, Ahlul Jannah, will consist of 120 sufuf, ranks. We won't call them lines of prayer, well, let's call them ranks. 80 of those ranks will be from my ummah, and the other 40 will be from all the other ummahs put together. 2/3 of Ahlul Jannah, walillahi alhamd, is from the ummah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. With such nobility, with such a maqam or station that Allah Jalla wa Ala has given it, speaking of it either in His book or through the tongue, upon the tongue of His Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, how is it that such an ummah reaches this particular position, that on the one hand, for such a long time we have become doormats largely for Western policies and strategies to play themselves out in Muslim majority lands regardless of the consequences, or afflicted with great famine and economic hardships, not always of Western interference, or civil wars, again not always necessarily made by interference. It could just be the jahala of the Muslims themselves. And the consequences is that the 12, 14, not 12, 14, the hundreds of millions of refugees across the world today, the vast majority of them are Muslims who have either been displaced from their houses and lands, or they're in their lands but they're in a war situation. It's true we feel in some great way the tragedy that Maulana Zia mentioned today, of which we don't know enough details at the moment, but it does look like a significant number of people have been killed in one of the cranes falling on the Safa Marwa area in the Haram due to the intensity of the sandstorms that have been raging for a day or two. And that's a tragedy that on one hand the heart hopes that they die a death of a shaheed, an honourable death, and it's in the best of places, almost in the best of times. But on the other hand, there is a sorrow, a sense of loss. And whilst we, like Maulana Zia quite rightly said, we hope that the kingdom would do, bi'idhnillah, everything in its power to address the situation and rectify the situation, and to ensure, bi'idhnillah, that it doesn't happen when Hajj actually is in full swing. But we also would hope that, is there a way that the kingdom could resolve its view of Yemen without any, I know the bombings have stopped, but without any further bombings, which afflicts mainly women and children and civilians. Even if there could be a political narrative, oh, we're doing it for this reason and that reason, but still. Our greater tragedy as it stands today are the displaced men and women and children of war-torn Syria. If you stay in Syria and try to make something of it, you're between a rock and a hard place. On the one hand, there is the continuation of the Assad regime. This is the son now. We had 30 odd years of the father. And on the flip side of that is, if it's not the Assad regime that the men, women and children are fleeing from, then it's ISIS-controlled areas and ISIS in general. Either ISIS has come and taken over a particular town and bullied everyone into agreeing to its authority and its ideology, because if you don't, then you inevitably, even as a Muslim, will meet a sword. It doesn't matter how much la ilaha illallah you'll be saying. And so you're co-opted into agreeing to the situation, or the Assad regime co-opts you into agreeing with their situation. And the fleeing refugees, once upon a time, much of Western Europe was a haven for refugees. We are now in a political time whereby much of Europe and the right-wing tendency that is rising in it, and from that right-wing tendency is a tendency towards anti-Islam or Islamophobia, and the fear of Europe that the European identity will be forever changed by further influxes of Muslims from wherever, then that generosity that was not too long ago seen from Western European countries is now not being seen, and therefore such refugees are having a difficult time. We have a situation whereby our Prime Minister has said that, okay, he'll let in some of the refugees, not the ones who are fleeing across European borders, but right from Syria itself. Let's just say when they come, and many of them will be children, the social services will begin to put those children into hospices, orphanages, care homes, and families. And families. How many of those will be Muslim, and how many of us will look at our lives and see, can we take on possibly an orphan or a refugee child? Will be the question that Allah will ask us. By and large, to get to the more religious bit of this, because right now all I've said is something that you all know and we can read it on the news. And to get more to the religious bit, right now, many of us feel that, well, this person is to blame, this government is to blame, this organization is to blame. Quite often we Muslims are good at that. Someone is to blame other than us. America and Britain are to blame for not sending in their troops to Syria at the time when they should have, even when chemical weapons were used. The Allied forces, and our country included, are to blame for the mess of Iraq, for Afghanistan, and there's no doubt at all. And this is well before I was even born, and before my parents were even born. Many Muslim lands have been used as just a game of chess or pawns in the global political fight for power and geostrategic oil and geostrategic power. And such countries, not talking about individuals in them, just such countries as a whole, like our country, have blood on their hands with all that they have done for so many decades. And so one would feel, especially a young person maybe, would feel anger and rage. We need to do something. But you know what? Since 1979, when on telly, here, my generation, people of my generation, were the first children to be born in the UK to Muslim parents who came maybe in the late 50s or the 60s. And by the time we're getting to college age or university age, 1979 comes, there's a revolution which we thought it was an Islamic revolution, the Iranian revolution. There was the Soviets entering Afghanistan, and the first time you heard on British TV, BBC, ITV, the word jihad and mujahideen. From that time onwards, we've always found someone to blame. And from that time onwards, politically, we've tried a lot of things. And this is not a case, whatever I mention now, it's not to say that I agree with it or disagree with it. Just to let us, remind us, in my lifetime, Yasser Arafat and the PLO, and then later on Hamas, have tried to improve the situation from their point of view, for the situation of the Palestinians, a right to return to their land, and so on and so forth. That country in the modern world which was carved out purely for the sake of Muslims, Pakistan, has, almost since its inception, experiencing martial law and all difficulties, adopted this tactic, that tactic, to bring about some type of stability and goodness. The Middle East and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and the oil-rich countries have done various things. Political movements, whether it's Ikhwan al-Muslimun over in the Middle East or Jamaat al-Islami over in the Indian subcontinent, have tried various political ideas and tactics. This is not the case to analyze it and go through what is right and what was wrong from it, but just to show that a lot has been going on. It's not that Muslims have sat down and, oh, whatever is going to happen is going to happen. No, things have been done. Sometime in the late 80s, some of the Muslim militias in Lebanon invented the idea, well, they didn't invent the idea, but invented the idea and brought it into the Muslim way of thinking, the idea of suicide bombings, which then give it about a decade and a half, 15 odd years, became quite significant as a political tactic. Again, not looking at the Shari'i hukum of this, right or wrong, halal or haram, just to show that we've done as an ummah all types of strategies. Even our country, some of them, many of them reformed along secular lines to bring it into line with Western secularism, even if that meant brutally putting down Muslim tradition and traditional patterns of life. To get that izzah, that dignity and honor. We've tried that. Currently, there is at least one place in the land, in the world, that is trying a harsher way. ISIS wants to bring back certain rules and ahkam. But because the fiqh isn't there, because they are not fuqaha, because they are not ulama, because they have no connection with fiqh, they understand one thing and are ignorant of 10 things and do something under the name of Islam. And the result is it turns away many thousands, hundreds of thousands of people's hearts from the deen, from the tawheed of Allah Jalla wa'ala. Again, point is, lots of things have been going on. And yet, that elusive goal of izzah, of dignity, of honor, of aman, peace in the land, of being equal on the world's political stage, in ordinary Muslims having a say in how their lives are shaped in their own majority Muslim countries that reflect their tradition, their aspirations. Country after country, it's still missing. So the question would be, what else could we do? Maybe we haven't lifted the sword enough. Maybe we haven't shed enough blood. Maybe there needs to be more beheadings. Maybe we need to secularize more. Maybe we need to give up more of the deen. Maybe we need to turn our back on the book and the sunnah even more and adopt secular ways. What more could be done to bring about the promise that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned in a number of places in the Quran, that the believers will inherit the earth. The mu'minun, the believers, will inherit the earth, and He will give them tamkeen. He will establish themselves on the earth. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا إن تنصروا الله ينصركم ويثبت أقدامكم. O you who believe, if you help Allah, Allah will help you. وَيُثَبِّتْ أَقْدَامَكُمْ, and He will establish your feet firmly. And He will put you firm on the earth, help you against your enemies. What more could we do to bring about that promise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we seem not to have done already? Well, when we look into the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and when the Quran tells us of the story of the prophets who came before the Prophet ﷺ, and the ummah, the believing community around them, especially the story of Banu Israel, the Israelites, with Musa alayhi salam, or Dawood alayhi salam, or Sulaiman alayhi salam, or even with Isa alayhi salam, there are so many valuable lessons. And there is a constant lesson, one constant lesson, a recurring lesson, time and again in the Quran. The lesson of when the believers are weak in the land and humiliated or oppressed by a power or an authority that doesn't want them to thrive. And there are many examples of this in the Quran. And the ideal example is the Muslims of Makkah in the time of the Prophet ﷺ. What is the lesson, the underlying lesson that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala repeats time and again in this political situation when Muslims are weak and oppressed, they are living under tyranny, or economic famine, or some type of social political hardship, what is it that the Quran, not my political views, not what my political party says, not what I think by going on social media and checking out Twitter and Facebook and whatever social media feeds, what does the Book of Allah itself teach us, or the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ teach us about how to change the affair and turn the tables? I put it to you, my brothers and elders and sisters, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't want from us just any action. Allah doesn't just say, do action, do amal. He wants from us a particular type of amal, a particular type of action or actions. Just like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't just want us to love Him, oh I love Allah. Allah wants us to become beloved to Him, that He loves us. If I say, oh I love Allah, oh Allah, He's my beloved, and I'm not praying and I'm not fasting and I'm doing all the harams knowingly, how can that be love? That's rebelliousness. That's delusion, but it's not mahabbah. So Allah doesn't want us to make the claim or do any act. He wants us to do particular acts. So I'll mention one ayah which I've already mentioned. I'll mention two verses actually. One I've already mentioned and one hadith as a reminder. And hopefully many of you have heard it before, but I want to impress this again and again until it becomes our almost automatic way of thinking in these events. This is from Revelation. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in this verse, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu in tansurullah yansurkum. If you help Allah, or you believe, if you help Allah. So here's a question going in our minds. How do we help Allah? But in tansurullah, if you help Allah, yansurkum. We will get the divine help back. If we help Allah, Allah will help us. And the consequence of that is وَيُثَبِّتْ أَقْدَامَكُمْ, and He will establish your feet firmly, plant your feet firmly. Of course, our aqeedah, our beliefs tell us that Allah is al-Ghani. He is self-sufficient. He is independent. Ghani we can use as rich. Like we say, one of the titles of the third caliph, Uthman radiallahu anhu, Dhun Nurayn, the possessor of two lights, he's known by. But he's also known as Uthman al-Ghani, because he was very rich. Allah blessed him with an incredible amount of wealth during the lifetime of the Prophet, which he spent the vast majority of for the sake of Allah, for the sake of Islam, for the jihad, for the orphans, for the betterment of the Muslims. But when Allah is al-Ghani, that He is rich, of course He is rich, that everything is in His hands. But it also, Ghani also means someone who is independent. Why? Because when someone is rich, they're independent of other people's needs. I don't now need a job from you. I don't now need to ask you anything. Because I'm rich enough to, whatever I need, my money and my wealth can bring it to me. So Ghani means someone who is independent, not in need of anything, let alone rich. When Allah is Al-Ghani, He is not in need of anything. He's not in need of our Islam. He's not in need of our Salah. He's not in need of our glorification of Him. So when the Quran is saying, in tansurullah, if you help Allah, how can we help Allah? Allah is saying if. This is a conditional clause. In Arabic is a conditional clause. If you do this, only then will I do that. In tansurullah yansurkum is what they call a conditional clause. That this thing will happen, Allah's help will happen only if you fulfill the condition, which in this case is help Allah. So therefore, it's really important that I understand, well, what does it mean to help Allah? When Allah Himself is Al-Ghani, subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then, when we work back to the teachings of our ulama, and when I say ulama, I'm talking about the people of Sanad, the Ahlul Isnad, the people who they have learnt from scholars, who learnt from scholars, who learnt from scholars, all the way back to the great Imams, all the way back to the Sahaba, to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Not someone who's read books themselves, even if he's intelligent, but he's like a sahifi, just he's learned his knowledge from books or online. Okay, maybe he sat at the feet of scholars for 2 minutes here, an hour there, whatever, but by and large it's book learning. And now he's giving fatwas. A'udhu billah, there is no sanad there. There is no ijazah there. Okay, there is no ijazah there. Ijazah was what? Authorization was what? The Prophet ﷺ gave ijazah to a few people of the Sahaba, a few, to say, look, even when I'm here, you can give fatwas. You can give fatwas. And the rest of you Sahaba, you have to follow your ulama. Okay? Because the Prophet ﷺ authorized them. When the Prophet ﷺ was no longer with them, some of these Sahaba who lived long time, Abu Bakr only lived 2 years, but some of them who lived a long time, they then also had students who they gave ijazah to, authorization. I authorize you. Now that you're part of this sanad, this silsila, this chain, that the Prophet authorized me, I'm authorizing you to give fatwas or to religiously teach the religious Islamic sciences. And this continued. This is when I say ulama, I'm talking about this ahlul isnad. Not just someone who comes from outside and plonks themselves in and gives fatwas, because they are a fitna. If they haven't taken knowledge from the hearts of men, who took it from the hearts of men, all the way back to the earliest of times, they're cowboys. And if you and I are going to big up cowboys, we should expect the calamity and the fitna that normally happens when you give preference to cowboys over masters. The Ahlul Islam, the people of Islam, they say in our books of tafsir, in tansurullah, if you help Allah, is if you act upon what Allah has commanded you with. From the zahir of the verse, if you read the verse with your Arabic dictionary or your modern Arabic language, I'm a Jazairi, I'm a Maghribi, I'm a Qatari, I'm a Saudi, I'm a Misri, and you read the verse in tansurullah and you try to understand it dictionary-wise, how do you help Allah? But no, that's not the ma'na. That's not the ma'na of the Quran. In this verse, in tansurullah here means if you help Allah, meaning if you act upon what He has commanded you with, yansurkum, He will help you. If you act upon that which Allah has commanded you with. So let me bring in the hadith. The Prophet ﷺ said, and it's a Sahih hadith in the Sunan of Abu Dawud, إذا تبايعتم بالعينة وأخذتم أذناب البقر ورضيتم بالزرع وتركتم الجهاد سلط الله عليكم ذلا لا ينزعه عنكم حتى ترجعوا إلى دينكم. When you deal in عينة, a particular transaction involving riba or usury, when you deal in usury, interest, and you hold on to the tails of the cow and content yourself with farming. This is a kinaya or a metaphor for just living a worldly life. And the world is more our concern than the hereafter. And you abandon jihad in the path of Allah, and jihad has many levels. With the self, with the wealth, with the tongue, with the body. And you abandon jihad in the path of Allah, Allah will permit your humiliation. Who? Not the United Nations, not the United States, not the European Union, not this political faction, not that political ideology, not the big money makers and the key bankers of the world, banking conglomerates of the world. Allah will permit your humiliation. And He will not lift this humiliation from you until you return to your deen. Meaning until you return to practicing your deen, because alhamdulillah, we're already Muslim. Look at this. The Prophet ﷺ said that there will come a time when our striving, our mujahada, our juhud, we will have it, but it won't be for Allah or His deen. It will be to make sure our houses get bigger, our cars are newer, we can go on more holiday trips to those lovely places, and we can get bigger TVs, and we can do this, and we will strive. In this country, many Muslims, especially if they came in as like refugees in the 1970s, the East African Muslims, okay, they had nothing, they had much wherever they were in Uganda, and they came to this country with nothing because that was the political. And so many of them, alhamdulillah, by their own sweat and blood, mashallah, have made so much good for themselves. I'm not speaking about living life comfortably, and that's haram, absolutely not. رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ حَسَنَةً وَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ. I'm talking about when living life comfortably and well-to-do becomes the goal, or the main goal, and everything else comes after, including Allah and Akhirah. Allah and Akhirah is there, but it's at the bottom. Dunya is at the top. Otherwise, if it was Allah and Akhirah at the top, and good dunya is after, then alhamdulillah, fantastic. But that's not normally the way. So we have juhud, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us, when we give it up for Allah in the hereafter, and when we apply our efforts somewhere else, when we start looking at the Sharia, because here is the point. When the Prophet said, إِذَا تَبَعَيَأْتُمْ بِالْعِينَةِ, when you deal in ina is not just riba. It's a subtle way of riba. Actually, what the scholars say is, it's a way of outwardly it looks halal, but you found a loophole. You found a small loophole in the Sharia by which you know you can do haram and you do it. So ina is this. If I say, look, I need £100. I really urgently need £100. Could you give me £100? And stop for using you as an example, because it's a negative example. Please forgive me. And you say, yeah, you'll give me £100, but for how long? I say, just 1 month. Then I'll give you back. He goes, okay, at the end of the month, give me £100, £115 back, or £110 back. Yeah, but I'm only borrowing £100, yes, and I want £110 back. All of us will know that that transaction is riba, interest, haram, because he's asking back more than the actual original capital. If without asking I give him 110, Jazakallah khair, brother, then this is the sunnah. The Prophet would always, if he was in a position, he'd always pay back his debt, and he'll pay back a bit more out of his kindness and as an act of expression, not because it was written that I have to pay more. Because the ziyada, even if it's 1 penny, is riba, it's haram, and the contract becomes unlawful. So I want £100, and the brother is fixated on getting more from me. So he says, no, I'll tell you what I'll do. So the brother says, look, Abu Aaliyah, I've got this phone. I'll sell it to you for £100. Now I don't need a phone, I need just £100. Now he's all of a sudden, I'm thinking, what is this madman doing? He's selling me a phone. He said, no. I'm selling your phone. You just trust me. I say, okay. So he gives me the phone. Okay. He says, now that you've taken this phone from me, this phone, I'm selling it to you for £110. I'm thinking, okay, but I don't have even any money. He goes, no problem. You can pay it back after a month. Agreed? No. I said, okay, agreed. Because I'm going along with his plan. Then, 10 seconds later, he says, okay, Abu Aaliyah, I will buy that phone back from you for £100. So I give him his phone back. He gives me £100. So I've got the £100 that I need. He's got his phone back, except at the end of the month, I don't have to give him £100 back. I have to give him 110. Each of those two transactions, he sells me a phone for £110 to be paid later. It's a halal transaction. The second transaction, I sell the phone back to him for £100. It's a halal transaction. But you put that together with the niyyah, the intention, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّةِ, that we're actually trying to find a way whereby he can get more money than he lent me in one go, that's Ina. So the Prophet ﷺ said, when you start doing these things, finding loopholes in the Sharia. So your idea is not to submit to Allah's hukum and Allah's wisdom and Allah's judgment. It's to find loopholes. When you start having that mentality, and when you start becoming dunya-fied, 9 to 5, holding on to the tails of a cow, contenting yourself with farming or agriculture, and all you do is you become a service economy for what? For, what's the word? Tourists. Come to my 7-star hotel, check out the beaches, you can't drink on our planes, but hey, we'll turn a blind eye to what goes on in the hotel. When you become that much dunya-fied, and you abandon that striving, that jihad for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and apply it to dunya, the Prophet ﷺ said, Sallallahu alaykum dhullah, Allah will permit your humiliation. You deserve humiliation. You don't deserve honor, so Allah gives you what you deserve. Al-jaza min jinsil amal, the scholars say. Rewards are proportional to the deeds. So if the deed was a deed of humiliation, then that's your recompense, humiliation. And Allah won't lift this humiliation from you until you return to practicing your religion. So the things that we have tried, this, that, the various Islamic movements, for so many decades, over 5 decades, 6 decades, and it hasn't brought the fruits, it's because it seems like the very one thing that Allah wants us to try hard and commit to, we haven't quite done it, which is amal, acting upon the teachings of Islam, commands and prohibitions with ikhlas in accordance with the Sharia and the scholars of the Sharia. Then Allah says, the Prophet said, He will lift our humiliation from us. Allah will lift the humiliation. And you and I know that that humiliation has not been lifted. But just a khulasatul qawl, a final thing that I like to say. For people who think that the solution has to be really complex, and we need some deep political analysis. We need deep thinking, no doubt, but the deep thinking is to understand how can we hatta tarji'u ila dinikum, return back to our religion. Even the best of the Muslims, quite often, not always, so much haram we enter into our houses. Now if Sheikh said, I remember when I was growing up, and I used to have these, I was just, I did Friday khutbah I prayed Friday prayer in Leytonstone Masjid. And I remember when I was young, these Maulanas and Sheikhs would be sitting on the pulpit, normally speaking Urdu, white beards and whatever, 9 times out of 10 from India, so they weren't even born here. And they'd say, oh, TV is haram, and pictures are haram, and this is haram. And to me, Islam was just haram, 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 haram. And people like my age used to think, okay, you lot can do it because you were never brought up with anything. You try being brought up in the West and see what happens. And after a little while, shaitan gets to you, and you might even begin to have a nafra, a kind of a disdain, a loathing towards such ulama. But subhanAllah, all they were saying, even if some of them didn't quite know how to say it, all they were saying is, look, when the heart sins, it becomes veiled from Allah. And when the heart sins and the hands are raised in dua, there is a hijab between us and Allah because we're sinning. And one of the main sins, wherever else you may sin, and your eyes see funny things on the tube at work and in the public sphere, you can't control, but in your house, when you're looking at something that Allah commands, ghaddul basar, lower your gaze or avert your gaze, and we're looking, and in the beginning it's a little bit, because even though you shouldn't look, after a few weeks or a few months or a few years, you just look. Slowly and steadily the haya, the shalom, slowly goes, because you get used to it. Once haya is gone, iman is going, because haya and iman, as the hadith says, they're connected. I'm giving a small example. But here I am, I'm really political, I'm really passionate about Syria, about Palestine, about Iraq, or whatever. But I come home and I'm just watching. Yeah, but it's just innocent, isn't it? I'm just chilling out. You can't expect me to do Allah 24/7. No, but then let me chill out. You should be reminding me, Abu Ali, try to chill out in a way that doesn't involve haram and offending Allah and His Sharia. Chilling out is understandable. What I'm trying to say is, we may think we have returned to our deen. Even those of us who pray. But how much of my prayer is inward as well? The sunnah of the prayer is that we pray it outwardly according to the conditions and the wajibat and the faraid and the arkan and the shurut. But also there needs to be an inward prayer. Otherwise, as Imam Ibn Ata'illah al-Iskandari rahmatullah alayhi said, that we may end up being like one of those, in the old days, a water container, like a leather water bag, which is really old and has lots of creases in it. And there's a small little hole, because it's so old and worn out, that you think you're putting water in it and you're going for a long journey across the desert, and you think you've got a day's worth of water, but slowly and steadily the water is dripping out. When you feel that you need the water and drink it, it's all gone, because you think you had good stored, but actually it was dripping away. I think I had my salat and my hajj and my this, but actually the harams that I was doing unknowingly, knowingly and unknowingly, but they were clearly major sins. And they were, for one prayer I prayed for 10 minutes, but then haram I'm doing for the next 4 or 5 hours. In how I buy and sell and what I see and what I don't see, and other mu'amala. In the end it could be just good deeds dripping away. So, hatta tarju ila dinikum. The Prophet is saying, until you return to your religion. Not until you become more politically active. Not until you become more politically, economically wiser. Until you become, until you agree, yes, we too will also behead people and parade them. Oh, by the way, in the Sunan of, just what comes to my mind, in the Sunan of Bayhaqi, there is a narration, inshallah, it's Sahih, in which one of the Sahaba, I think it's Anas radiallahu anhu, I can't remember what Sahabi reports this. The Sahabi reports that never was a decapitated head presented to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And when one day a decapitated head was presented to Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, this is same narration, he said, this is not from our way, because the Prophet ﷺ never approved of this practice. Of course, there are certain capital punishments that may involve the decapitation. In the days of the Prophet ﷺ, as in pre-modern societies, even in this country, in 18th century England or 16th century England, many ordinary men would be skilled with a sword. Okay? Many ordinary men would be skilled with a sword. Of course, in those days, there were even more men skilled with swords, as they would have been in this country at the same time. So when it came to decapitation, it was considered that the sword is the cleanest way to bring someone's life to an end. It's the cleanest way, it cuts the jugular, you don't feel anything, and you're out instantaneously. And if it's done with a skilled swordsman, and most people were skilled in those days to know how to do that, that's how it's used. Now when you choose on purpose, not you, but when the brothers of ISIS choose on purpose to use a dull blade, and let's just say they're born in the West and they don't even know how to slaughter a chicken, and slaughtering a chicken is hard, right? If you've never done it before, it's hard to get that in one swipe, let alone a cow or a sheep. And you're doing that to a human being like that, okay? And then you're allowing the kids to play football with it or whatever. How does that actually reflect the teachings of the Prophet ﷺ? So we don't need to go to extremes. That, the Prophet ﷺ never had this type of corporal punishment. In some cases, there were these corporal punishments. Understanding it was the best way to execute someone. Because it's over straight away. You shoot, if you had a gun and shoot them, it's still not guaranteed that they're going to die instantaneously, because they could bleed out for an hour, not if you execute it, if you sever their heads. So we don't need to go to that extreme that, oh, we don't ever have these kind of things. We have no such thing as hudud punishments, even though that's not a had actually. And neither should we go to the other thing that it has no ma'na, meaning or wisdom. What I'm trying to say is, until we return to our deen, sincerely, committedly, and enough of us are doing that. And we're not just praying the prayer, but we're doing things, and we're trying to be very careful that the water is not dripping, the water of good deeds is not dripping out the bag of taqwa, of the water bag of taqwa. Until then, hatta tarju ila dinikum. It is not in my hands, and it was never in your hands. It was never in my hands, it was never in the hands of our rulers, it was never in the hands of our ulama, it was never in any human being's hand, even if it be a prophet. It was and is always in Allah's hand. And when Allah Jalla wa Ala has said, upon the tongue of His Habib Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, hatta tarju ila dinikum, until you return back to practicing your religion, until you return back to your religion, then only then will Allah lift the humiliation. Why are we waiting for something else? When Allah has spoken and His Messenger Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. If we are not ready to learn that lesson, how can Allah help us when He's given us the clarity of guidance? My final remark is, Islam is not just for the masjid, it's for the entire life. It is not pleasing to Allah that I'm in the masjid doing good deeds. That's of course pleasing to Allah. Then I go out as if there is no Allah and no Sharia. So the way I buy and sell, the way I'm at home with my wife and children, the way I'm with my parents, the way I am with my neighbour, the way I'm with a dog or a cat or a fish, just according to my whims and desires, and not according to Allah's Sharia and wisdom and hikmah, then this is not pleasing to Allah Jalla wa Ala. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us tawfiq to return to our deen inwardly and outwardly. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He give relief and help and assistance to all of those men, women and children who are in a state of tyranny, oppression, hunger, refugee status, and all of those who are suffering, whatever type of suffering they are suffering. Allah is Al-Kafi, Allah is Ash-Shafi. He is the one who suffices, He is the one who cures. There is no cure except from Him. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He cure hearts, He cure diseases and illnesses, and He cure us from the humiliation that our own a'mal, our own actions have brought us to such a humiliation. We ask Allah He returns us to our deen in a way that He is pleased. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifoon wa salamun ala al-mursaleen walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Any questions? Ideally on what we've said, if not then just general. What time is the other 1:45? So we've got about 5-10 minutes for questions inshallah. I don't know if there are any sisters listening, if they have any questions they could perhaps write it down and somehow get it down here inshallah. One of the things that is very important for each of us to do is now and again, maybe every year, to basically revise a small little booklet or small little text on al-kabair, major sins, so that we can know what they are and just avoid them and refresh our memory every year to avoid them. Not necessarily all 30, 40, 50 of them, just 10, 12 of them that generally repeat themselves, especially the kabair to do with the eyes and the tongue, which are very easy to fall into and forget. We have to make that type of religious knowledge is absolutely essential. And yet, here are people who are going to be arguing whether you do Rafaidain or not, whether you say Ameen loud or not, how exactly do you stand in the prayer, do you touch and do, and none of them have Arabic, none of them have training in fiqh. But the things that are fard upon them to know, that these things are the muharramat, the basic haram things that everyone's agreed upon. Mujma' alayh. It doesn't matter what madhab you're from, these are agreed upon. And these, subhanAllah, we don't know. So I don't know what is the Islamic definition of backbiting, ghiba, and it's a major sin. I don't know what namima is, tail carrying, what is the Islamic definition, therefore I get involved in that. And these are major sins, major, that I'm doing. And if I do, subhanAllah. And my Sheikh Jalil Ahmed Akhwan, Hafidhullah Ta'ala, he said that this is also an answer to why many Muslims say, oh, but I'm praying and fasting, but there's nothing seems to be changing in my life for the better. He said that's because you may be praying and fasting, but you have no care for what is haram. And it's a bit like turning the central heating on in a cold winter's day, leaving all the doors and the windows open. Even if you have the best central heating, it's not going to have any effect. Not because the heating isn't good, not because the heating isn't working, it's working and it's fantastic. It's because you left the windows open. So good deeds, when they are amidst a plethora of harams that we're not making tawbah for, trying to avoid, it's the same thing. How will we get the benefit of that warmth? So this is the type of knowledge we learn. And Imam al-Hasan al-Basri, rahmatullah alayh, he has subhanAllah, really a small saying which really deeply impressed me when I first heard it. He said, Himmatul ulama ar-ri'aya, wa himmatul sufaha ar-riwaya. The concern of the scholar is to shepherd, to cultivate, to nurture bit by bit. And the concern of the idiot is just to narrate. He has this bit of knowledge, he doesn't know whether it's beneficial or not, he's just going to say. But the scholars, they are murabbiyun, rabbaniyun. They teach people basic small knowledge before the big detailed knowledge so that we can grow. Okay. And from that essential basic knowledges, we need to know some of the basic muharramat. As a son, as a child, in front of my parents, I need to know that it's haram for me to say uff to my parents. Oh, I might disagree with my mum and dad. They may even be wrong. But I have to find a way to disagree with them honorably. Because just to say or even that much is a major sin. Not small, but major sin. And how many are we doing to our parents in a day? And somehow we're given lots of charity and whatever, and then we find, hold on a minute, the good deed is driven out of the bag of taqwa because we're not clear that there's a small hole there. So really, this is the type of ilm we should be careful of. And the amal al-qalb. I have to, and these are difficult ones, the actions of the heart are very difficult. I'm praying, but I'm showing off. I'm giving charity, but I'm hoping to get my name mentioned. I see someone with a blessing of Allah and I have jealousy towards him. I'm very educated and very rich, and I look down upon those who aren't as rich or as educated. And kibr, arrogance. SubhanAllah, the yesterday or the day before Apple announcement, its autumn announcement, is more important to me, right? Because I was waiting for it for 6 months, right? More than I get around to reading that one day, okay? But there I am, 10 o'clock or whatever time that session started. Here I am, live streaming, watching the Apple announcement, because I'm hoping they'll give me a better watch. So look at the passion I have for the dunya, but not the same type of passion for akhirah. So the action, and that's called hubb al-dunya. It's a reflection of hubb al-dunya, love of this world. Those are obligations to have and not have as well. Otherwise we may pray a prayer and there is no inward connection. And we're not even trying to be connected. We need to, on the one hand, we hope that Allah will accept it, but we also should fear that Allah will say, you prayed a prayer with no attention to me. You had no attentiveness to me. You would not accept your son or your daughter standing in front of you and you're telling them something important and they don't pay attention. You wouldn't expect this as a student. You wouldn't expect this as a boss towards his worker. But you want to do this to Allah. You want to do this to me, Allah will say. Allah will say, this is su'ul adab, this is bad manners. And bad manners are seldom rewarded. So we need to learn good manners with Allah through our heart. This is the type of knowledge which will benefit. And it doesn't matter whether we're 7 years old or 70 years old, we're all in need of this type of ilm.